Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take the sources you send us, we cut through all the noise, and really just deliver the essential knowledge you need.
Exactly.
And today we are diving into the surprisingly complex world of fundraising strategy. The source material you gave us is all about this one simple, almost mathematical approach. It's a formula called 12141.
12141.
Yeah, it sounds like some kind of spy code, doesn't it? But it's actually a framework. It's designed to break down one of the biggest psychological hurdles in the whole nonprofit world, because asking for money, it turns out, is terrifying. The sources you sent point to this really startling fact that a lot of people are more afraid of asking for a donation than public speaking.
Or even talking about death, which is just, it's wild when you think about it.
It is.
And that resistance, that psychological barrier, it's huge. And it comes from these really, deep-seated cultural ideas about money and social status. So if you go into that conversation already in a kind of flight or fight mode, the whole thing is basically poisoned from the start.
Right.
Our mission here is really to unpack how this 1141 formula can rebalance that whole emotional equation, how it turns the ask from a plea into, an actual partnership.
Okay, so let's unpack that then. If the fear is so real, where does it come from? You mentioned social standing, and the sources keep coming back to this idea of a perceived power imbalance.
Precisely. That's the core of it. In almost any situation where money is being asked for, the person asking the nonprofit rep, they just instinctively feel like the person with the money is in a better social position.
So they feel smaller in a way.
They feel diminished, yeah. And that makes them tentative, and that completely undermines the integrity of their own mission.
The sources had a really powerful way of visualizing this, that classroom experiment.
Oh, it's a great analogy.
Can you walk us through it?
Sure. So they set up this simple scenario. They asked the shortest person in the room to go ask a favor from the tallest person. But the tallest person is also standing on a chair.
Okay, so they're physically dominant.
Massively. And almost every single time, the shorter person would physically adopt a submissive stance. They'd lower their head, maybe bring their hands together like they were praying or something.
Wow.
They were physically showing how they felt on the inside, lesser than the person they needed something from.
And the key part of that is when they flipped it, right? Or when they both just sat down as equals.
That's it. The submission just vanished. It wasn't about who was taller or shorter. It was about the power dynamic they created in the room.
So that's the core fundraising insight right there.
Exactly. If you can get rid of that power differential, or at least lessen it, the entire conversation changes. It forces us to challenge this basic assumption that the nonprofit needs the money more than the donor needs to give it.
And that's a huge challenge, because our default is to think, we need, they give.
Right. It sets up that submissive relationship from the get-go.
So if we want to reject that, we have to understand why the power should be equal. We have to really look at what's motivating the donor in the first place.
And the research here is, it's overwhelmingly clear. You look at decades of studies. The sources point to some big ones, like the 7 Faces of Philanthropy back in '94. And the number one reason people give money, it's not the tax deduction. It's not even always about the organization itself.
What is it?
It's because they care deeply about the mission. And even more specifically, they care about the actual people that the nonprofit serves.
So the donor is looking for an emotional return. They have this values-driven need to make a difference.
Yes.
And that's where the fundraiser becomes not a beggar, but an essential partner.
That's exactly right. The nonprofit rep, they're bringing something of equal specialized value to that table. They're bringing the mechanism, the infrastructure, the trusted way for that donor to act on their philanthropic goals.
Because the donor can't just go build a well themselves.
They can't. The nonprofit is the facilitator. They make it possible for the donor to fulfill their own mission.
Which brings us to the first part of the formula. This is the foundation. 1-to-1.
1-to-1.
It's about 2 people sitting down as absolute equals. You have one person, the solicitor, who has the plan, the solution, and you have the other person, the donor, who has the resources to make it happen.
It's a strategic conversation. It's not a plea. It's a partnership between 2 committed people.
And when you frame it like that fear we talked about at the beginning, it sort of just evaporates.
It has to. You can't feel diminished when you realize you're providing a service the donor can't get any other way. You are a valued partner helping them achieve their goals.
Okay, so this is where it gets, for me, really interesting. We move from the social dynamics to human psychology with the second part of the formula. for one.
This part is fascinating. It's all about our basic human inability to emotionally connect with huge abstract numbers. The sources argue that we really struggle to process anything bigger than a single unit.
Like the computer analogy they used.
Yeah, that our most advanced creations, computers, they boil everything down to binary, to 1 and 0. It's almost like it reflects a limitation in our own brains. We are wired for the singular.
We can understand the idea of thousands of people in need, but we can't feel it.
Right, you can't feel empathy for a statistic. Psychologists call it psychic numbing. The scale is just too big, so we kind of shut down emotionally.
And this plays out in fundraising all the time, right? Like in direct mail.
Oh, constantly. The sources cite so many examples where a story about one person's struggle, let's call him Bob, a single dad who needs job training, that story will always raise more money than a general appeal to help thousands of struggling families.
Even if the wording is almost identical.
Even then, the help thousands approach just diffuses the energy. Your donation feels like a drop in the ocean. But when you talk about Bob, the donor can see it. They can see their $50 directly helping him.
It makes the impact tangible.
It makes it real. That singular connection is what drives generous giving.
So the practical tip here for any fundraiser is to personalize the ask. Don't ask someone to support the general budget.
No.
You should be asking, can you join me in helping someone like Bob with his problem? I have the way to do it. You have the resources.
The closer you can connect the donor to one specific person whose life will be changed, the more powerful that conversation becomes. For one is the emotional anchor that makes the one-to-one partnership feel meaningful.
So let's bring this all together. We started with this fear of asking, but now we have the full formula. When you meet one-to-one with a donor as partners, you are meeting for one specific person whose life you are going to change together.
Exactly.
And the power of Call 141 is that it completely gets rid of that feeling that you're begging. You're not asking for yourself. You're not even really asking for your organization. You're an advocate for Bob.
Right. And the sources draw this fantastic contrast with what they call the begging formula, 12-14 me.
1, 2, 1 for me.
Which is when the ask feels like it's for me, for my job security, for our operating budget, just to keep the lights on. That's what triggers the fear. The fundraiser feels that need, and they feel small.
So, we need this money to survive feels like a plea.
A desperate plea.
But we need this money so Bob gets his training feels like empowerment. You're an advocate.
It's a total reframe. And it's the key to winning that psychological battle before you even walk in the room. Fundraisers should be proud of what they're offering.
They're offering an opportunity.
An opportunity for the donor to fulfill their own goal, that deep desire to care by giving them the specific way to help the one person that you both now care about. The gift fulfills the donor's values. It's not a rescue package.
That is a phenomenal breakdown. It makes the whole 12-141 approach so incredibly clear. The power imbalance, the partnership structure, and then the psychology of that single human story.
And, if we take a step back, the source material makes this incredibly strong case for focusing on the individual, on Bob, to get that emotional buy-in. And that raises a really big question for you, the listener, to think about.
Okay.
If this principle works so well for individual gifts, how can a massive nonprofit, one that serves thousands of different people with dozens of programs, how can they structure their communications to keep that for one power at scale?
How do they avoid falling back into that helping thousands trap?
Exactly. How do you tell Bob's story and Sarah's story and Maria's story without losing that singular emotional punch? It's a huge strategic challenge.
It's something to really think about for your next campaign or your next donor meeting. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Now go apply that knowledge.